In a world of podcasts, one rises in the night to destroy them all. The elder god in an ocean of noise, the Cthulhu of the airwaves. This is Spoiler Country.
All right, everybody, welcome again to another episode of Spoiler Country. Today on the show, we have the host of the Long Shot Leaders, Michael Stein. Michael Stein, how you doing, man?
I'm doing really well, man. Thanks for having me on your show. I like your background there. You got the drum set, you got the American flag, you're looking sharp. It's out of focus, you're in focus, you look clean.
Oh, yeah. It's where I can go and hide from the rest of the family.
Is that the man cave?
It is. It was kind of a prerequisite for us buying the house that we did.
Where are you located?
Birmingham, Alabama. Well, about 30 minutes outside of Birmingham. So, yeah, the other guys, so Jeff, the guy that you've been corresponding with on email, is out of Rhode Island. And the other two guys are out of Washington State. And we have a writer who does interviews for us named Melissa Sersha. And she is out of Northern California.
How did all you guys meet up? So, do you guys all hang out at one time in the same area, or what happened with that?
No. So John and Kenric, the guys that started the podcast, I met them via Instagram. I run a group called The Comic Jam, and it's just like a bunch of different people that make comics. And once a week, we pair people up to do little one-page comics. I was talking to John over Instagram about some of his art, and I liked it. And he told me about his podcast, and then eventually I started helping out with just social media stuff, and I got them nuts. I can't think of his name right now. He's the German director of really, really awful sci-fi films, and I can't think of his name right now. But he was really intense dude, and got him on the show. And so after that, I've just kind of been helping out. So.
Well, I'm fearful of intense German dudes. Not that I have anything against Germans, but intense German dudes, then I get the,
Oh, yeah. He's the guy that he challenged the guy from Austin that yells a lot, and he has a red tomato face, and he has a radio internet show. I can't think of his name.
And he's from Austin.
Yes. Big, conspiracy theory guy.
Oh, yeah.
InfoWars guy. The InfoWars guy. I can't think of it.
John Jones, yeah. Jim Jones.
Something like that. Yeah, he challenged him to a fight not long ago, which I was like, yes, please, somebody, please.
I would like to see that.
Never happened. Yeah. We can hope. We can always hope. So, yeah, man, you guys, I've been looking at, and I listened to a few of your interviews today. You guys have got some great people on your show. How did this start?
Well, I've always been attracted to underdogs. I'm a long shot. I tell you about my background. My grandma escaped the Russian concentration camps, and my dad was a New York street kid. He became a multimillionaire, and then he lost all his money and became homeless again. But the one thing, he lived a lavish lifestyle, and my mom, they got a divorce. But the one thing she held on to was the home in Encino where I grew up. So I had to sleep in the same room with my grandmother, hearing these stories about how she escaped the Russian concentration camps. And I wasn't supposed to be alive. I was a premature kid. My mom, a large family. I was an oops baby, and I was unhealthy. And I, was a poor student. I had ADHD. I was diagnosed with that and dyslexia and all the crazy hobbies. And I was just really struggling. I was put in a special school for special needs kids. And then when I was 9 or 10 years old, I saw the movie Rocky, and it really turned me around. I saw somebody like myself. The only success I had at this point was making people laugh at me and making people laugh. So I saw the movie Rocky, and I was like, it changed everything. I said, this guy's like me. He's funny, but he, doesn't have a lot of friends. He only got, Paulie, and he's not, people don't think he's smart. So I said, the only difference with Rocky and myself is that he's in good shape. So then I started training and working out and making my life about physical fitness ever since I was 10 years old. And that was the second bit of success I had, which was, first it was laughter, and then it was fitness. And then I was a physical fitness trainer when I was 16. And then, getting at basically I had an up and down kind of lifestyle. So I had some successes, and then I was going to take on the world and start my own business when I turned 18. And I graduated high school, and my tutor said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to start my own business. I want to be an entrepreneur, and I want to be an actor. She said, you should probably think about working with your hands because not everybody's meant to do what they want to do. So then I started my own business 2 days later and I failed miserably. But then I started studying and I started doing stand-up and I started studying business. And then I became a nightclub promoter. I became the number one nightclub promoter in Los Angeles. My age bracket, I was 20 years old, and I was very successful. So I've had a lot of ups and downs from that. So I've always been attracted to underdogs. And from there, I dropped my promotion business and I went on to be a filmmaker. My first film was playing as an actor playing Dirt Diggler in the Dirt Diggler Story, which is the short film version to Boogie Nights, which I appear in as well. That got made in 1997. And then I became a filmmaker. I was, did really well doing that, but I did a short film that won a lot of awards, but it didn't get me a movie deal. That's what you make a short film for.
Yeah.
So I got close to getting a movie deal, met with every studio in Hollywood, pretty much, and I won the 2 biggest short film festivals in the world, but it just didn't turn over to a movie deal. So I said, I'm going to make a movie that no one, they were getting close to making a movie about underground gambling casinos in LA because I was a nightclub promoter and that's what I did that. But that didn't happen. So I said, I'm going to make a movie that nobody wants to make. And because if I'm going to spend my own money, I'm going to make this movie. But the only problem was I was broke and I was penniless and I was in debt. Actually, I didn't have any money to make this movie. So I said, I'm going to become an entrepreneur again. And that's when the internet was still young. I started a company selling tarps, which has nothing to do with the business. And that within 6 months, I made enough money to make this movie. And I made a movie with Faye Dunaway, Andy Dick, and Coolio, and a bunch of other actors. You've probably seen a lot of other movies. And that it got done. It won some awards, but once again, it didn't make money. And I said, you know what? I just, figured I've had a lot of ups and downs in my life. And I said, if I ever do a podcast, it's going to be about somebody that has ups and downs in their life. And that's why I started this podcast. And we started in March. And I guess people like the subject matter because people like underdog stories because we've been getting a lot of people to be, on the show.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. You're talking about the ups and downs. You're not that old of a guy yet. You've already lived a very interesting life so far.
That was just a Reader's Digest version, Speaking of Alabama, I went through Alabama. When I went off to be a filmmaker myself, right after when I did the Dirt Diggler story, I said, well, I'm going to do what my friend Paul did, Paul Thomas Anderson. I said, I'm going to make a movie like he did. He did a short film and made a feature film. And I said, well, I'm not a nightclub promoter anymore because I'm going to be a filmmaker. So I'm going to do a documentary. This is when the rave scene and house music was I'm going to do a documentary on the rave scene and house music, even though I didn't care for that music. And I did a documentary on the LA club scene, that was a big event. And I said, I'm going to show that one. And then I'm going to go around the country for 4 months filming all the big names. And I'm going to show my old documentary. So we did 12 big events across the country. I filmed everybody making this big documentary about the history and of house music and how it got started in raves. And I went through Alabama. We did a party in Georgia. We went all through the South. And we did, this is in the early to mid 90s. It was 94. And I went through the South and big party town in Birmingham, Alabama. Speaking of music, you got the music instruments right back there. It's a big music town, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We have a pretty interesting scene here, and it's sadly right now kind of on the decline with COVID and everything. Hopefully it bounces back, but we've got some cool places and hopefully we can keep those places going.
Right.
You're not too far away from some really, really great places in Texas. And
Austin, live music capital of the world.
It's an amazing town. So
it is.
Yeah. So what, obviously, you've lived so many different experiences and gone up and down. What made you decide to do a podcast after doing filmmaking and all these other things?
Well, right after I made that movie, Love Hollywood Style, I started making that movie in 2003. It was supposed to be just a small, house film. I was going to just do it dirty. Everybody back then was like, Robert Rodriguez, man. This was in 2003 after he did El Mariachi. But I was like, I'm going to give blood and I'm only going to make a movie for $6,000. It's going to be great. That's going to be the theme. And it's going to be done on the cheap. And I'm going to get all these big actors because, my short film did so well and I can get some names, And And then, feature film, because it's a feature film I'm doing now as opposed to a short film, you got to pay the crew. You got to pay them a lot more because you get into day 10, 15, 30, 20, 25. These guys want to get paid. So do actors. So, I was like, okay, I really want this to happen now. I want this actor, or I want that actor. I want this film set. And you start getting, it's a disease. The filmmakers have this disease of like, I can't have this film only be this big now. It's got to be this big. And now we got that. And I was like, I want Faye Dunaway. I want a 2-time Academy Award winning actor. Well, now I'm making money, right? And when a filmmaker, a habitual drug, I was never into drugs. But I was like, it's like a drug. You're like, oh, I want the Academy Award winning actor. How much can you, first of all, they just don't do anything for money. You got to like court them. I had to send over my short film. I had to like talk to their lawyer. They're like, what can we do to get her in there? I only need her for half a day. I'll set up everything, like 10 grand in a paper bag. I'm like, done. I don't care. Money's not an object, right? I'm like, spending all the money I'm making with this company I did, and I just got it took so much out of me, that, and I'm just getting to a point about the podcast. It took so much out of me when the film was done, and I was still doing stand-up comedy, in LA. But I had 2 kids, and in this whole time period of this life, me trying to be an actor and a filmmaker, my whole life. At that point, I said, you know what? I got 2 kids, and I said, my business keeps on growing. And this business, I was like a Happy Gilmore. I wanted, like, remember in Happy Gilmore, he wanted the hockey guy on the golf trophy.
Yeah.
My business is doing well. I'm like, that's cool. I love money, but I want to be a filmmaker. But I was like, you know what? I got 2 little girls. I said, I'm leaving LA. I'm gonna raise them. I'm gonna expand my business. And now, like just last year, my daughter's 15. She was 14 years old, and she's like, Dad. I'm like, hey, what are we gonna do now? What are we gonna do this? And she's like, I'm good. I think I'm gonna go do something with my friends right now. And that starts to happen. And so both of my girls, I got one's 15 and the other one's 12. And I'm like, they're getting their own life. I said, I think I'm ready to start to get back into not just being a father, just doing my business. I'm going to start to do ventures. And the podcast was the first thing I wanted to do, especially when COVID came out. I was like, I can't do stand-up.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, nobody's making films right now. So I was like, I'm going to do a podcast, which is something that, less bandwidth compared to everything else I've done. So I was like, let's do that. And then what else would I do? That's my theme on would be underdog stories, because I consider myself an underdog still.
I hear you. Yeah. It's so weird. I have a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old. And when they start, 2 girls also, when they start kind of being their own person, it's terrifying. And also it's kind of like, all right, I can get used to this.
It's still beautiful though.
Yeah,
you're at 10 and 6, right? And
yeah.
They still love you. You're the hero. Inevitably, and everybody told me this, but no one could tell you what a strawberry tastes like. You have to taste it. And then when you're at that 14, 15 years, and they still love you, but there's moments where you're like, this is really trying my patience, because, they're getting on with their life. They're trying it out. And you're like, they don't need me as much because they need their freedom.
Yeah. It's terrifying, man.
Welcome to the magic.
I know, right? So
it's in the mail, man. It's going to happen to you too. 2 girls.
Oh man. Yeah. I love it, but yeah, it's terrifying. So how have you been getting all of these people onto your show? Is it just connections you've made over the the years in Hollywood, or is it just friends you made along the way? Or are you inviting these people on, just cold calling?
I tell you what, it's funny that the Rolling Stones song always comes to mind. You can't always get what you want, but you get what you need. I mean, I didn't get X, Y, and Z, but there's a lot of people I met throughout the years of when you're a nightclub promoter, and I still keep in touch with a lot of people. When you're a nightclub promoter, you're like running for president without an education. You're just shaking hands and meeting as many people as you can. So inevitably, you're going to meet a lot of interesting people. So there's that. And then the film business, and then you just, I just love people also. I think the trifecta of those things, I love, like today, I'm meeting a new friend, Casey Allen. I I'm interested in finding more about you, and I'm just interested about people and psychology and personal development, which I've been heavily involved in, since I was like in my early 20s. So I just don't get tired of it. So I guess that part has come fairly easy to me.
Awesome. Yeah, and it seems like you've kind of gone across a wide spectrum of different people, different disciplines for your show, which it's pretty intriguing. I was just kind of going through all that. You had CEOs, you had actors, you had producers, you had writers. Is there any one particular person that you want to like really kind of dig into?
Well, there's several. One is I'd like to get Richard Dreyfuss, because
Oh, wow.
he is somebody that is, he was an actor. He was a great actor. He was also a comedic and a serious actor. And I think that, he's from LA and his family is very similar to mine. And I just think that would be a good interview in the practicality of we would have a lot to talk about.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
So, but there's just so many, I'm not political at all, but there's people that in our country, I'm just such a non-political person, but I see somebody on both ends. So there's some political people that I find fascinating just because they're really good at not the politics of something. They're just good at like either debating or, so I was like looking at like Ben Shapiro was like somebody I was like, I really just think the debating, he's just such a fast thinker or something like, so that was just like somebody I thought that'd be interesting. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I mean, that'd be kind of cool to like, talk to a bigger politician, not that it's so weird because politics fascinates me because it's such a thankless job. It's like, I would never want that job.
Oh, for sure.
So though, I guess those people, I mean, sports people, yeah, there's a lot of people though. I mean, I like normal people. Like I would like to find that ultimate long shot that not is necessarily famous either. That would be interesting. I'm surfing for somebody that's the ultimate underdog that has found success. To me, that's more interesting than all of them, really.
Yeah. I've actually kind of tossed around the idea of trying to get people to talk about their failures, which is a hard thing to invite somebody to do. And one thing that surprised me just on the opening, you were talking about your dad, how he, the ups and downs of both you and your father, how you grew up. A lot of people are not that open.
Right.
And that fascinates me. I grew up dirt poor and like we don't have a lot now, but it's a far cry from how I grew up where we were kind of worried about what we were going to eat at the end of the week. So when I see people who have kind of had an experience about worrying about that kind of stuff, right, it intrigues me, especially, and it also makes me happy when I see that they're doing well. So like, good on you, especially because I mean you've lived such an amazing life already.
Well, thanks. I think that it helps. I don't really have anything to hide anymore as an artist or as wanting to be still, pride myself as like, though I'm very serious today, as a stand-up comedian, right? And to me, all my favorite comedians were totally serious. You got to be like an open vessel, or as an actor, you want to be an open vessel, or to me is just as in personal growth. You really want to be brutally honest so you can grow, right? So I figured if I was going to do a podcast, and I'm definitely going to do one on underdog stories, I was going to like, dude, you gotta bring it. You gotta like brutally, and I didn't bring everything, because there are some private things, but I brought most of everything that I am totally insecure about, all my shortcomings. It's funny, if you got a real quick story, speaking of my dad, so I've been around so many different kinds of people in my life. My dad, he was, like I said, a New York street kid, homeless street kid. And his story was an up and down story. You ever hear of the company called Harbor Freight?
Oh, yes. I know exactly who that is.
Okay. So my dad's business partner was this guy named Alan Smith in the late 60s. and they weren't making any money. They were in the tool business. And then he left the tool business to go to selling calculators. And that's how my dad made a lot of money. So in 1973, these calculators were like, they became smaller. They used to be huge.
Oh, yeah. They used to be massive.
Right. And then in the 70s, he was known as the Calculator Kid. He came up with a mail order campaign. It was huge. And he's made like a couple $1 million in 14 months. 1973, that's a huge amount of money. And the guy that he left, this guy, Alan Smith, he started a company about a year after my dad made all that money called Harbor Freight. His name was Smitty. That's what they were called, Smitty. Alan Smith started Harbor Freight with my dad, an old business partner. And then my dad had this crazy lifestyle. I mean, we're talking, Casey, sheer carnality, like you wouldn't believe, like just crazy. I mean, my friend Paul Thomas Anderson, the Jack Horner character in Boogie Nights is kind of loosely based on my dad's caricatures and the parties he used to have.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah, I mean, craziness. So when I was a kid and my mom and dad got divorced, you know, first of all, I was a poor kid in a rich neighborhood. We were like the Encino Jubilees. We were like instead of the Beverly Hills Hillbillies, we were like poor, but I was around rich people. And then my dad, he would pick me up and I'd be around. He brought a prostitute to my bar mitzvah. I mean, he brought, you know, like,
oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, he would pick me up. I'd go to his house and, you know, there was this house called the Greenhouse, green Cadillac, greenhouse, green carpeting, green artwork on the walls, you know. And I said, Dad, why is everything green? He's like, because it's the color of money and the color of love. And all these strange people would kind of be like Aftermath, or I'd always had, you know, so I was around strange people my whole life, you know, and I think that, and there was no continuity, and I don't think there's any continuity on my show as far as people are concerned. The only continuity I think is that we tell underdog stories, and I don't care if it's somebody, I just had somebody from Africa. I don't care who it is, as long as they fit that criteria of, you know, struggle and finding success from struggle, and that's it.
Yeah, and you were talking about there's no continuity on your show, like on the real, like here from Larry Hankin, the character actor, to a jewelry designer. So Erica Annenberg, yeah, just such a wide swath of people, and that's fascinating to me. As an interviewer, has your experiences and your kind of background in comedy kind of helped you to, I guess, bridge the gap when it comes to people that are a little less likely to open up?
Yeah, you know what I think? I'm no different than everybody else I'm interviewing on my show, because everybody I talk to, they've had all these failures and failures and failures and failures, and then they find a bit of success and they multiply that success and then they move on. And then, but they look back at all those failures that they had. That's how they were able to achieve that. So the reason why I think, and I'm pretty good at podcasting and in the interview process, is because I was terrible as a kid. All I wanted to do was have friends and be able to communicate. I had a stutter. My mom looked like Marilyn Monroe, and she had a quicker response time than Don Rickles. And I wanted to be like her. She was my first comedian that I wanted to be like, you know, and I couldn't trip over my words. I couldn't hold up to her. So eventually I was able to, you know, hold up to the family, you know, like, cause we were fast talkers, and you gotta fight for what you can kind of grab onto in a big family, you know. Everybody's like, you know, it's cutthroat. So in a good way. And then, you know, I, you know, wanted to be an actor. So you study acting, right? And then I wanted to be a stand-up comedian. So then you're just doing stand-up comedy, and that helps. And then I wanted to be a filmmaker. And the first thing I do is doing a documentary where I'm interviewing tons of people, you know, like that documentary tour I went on for 4 months. All I did was interview people for 4 months. And then when you're an actor, also you're studying human nature, you're opening yourself up, and then also personal growth. So you're dealing with honest, you know, personal growth isn't all just about positivity. It's about looking all your inadequacies and then trying to improve yourself. So all those things and all those failures and all the things trying to attain those things, even though some of those things didn't come to fruition, I think that they helped me. And then when I found other things, now it helps, like business. All those things that I did now totally help. Like I've written 8 screenplays. I've made 2, but I haven't been able to get one made for me from Hollywood. But writing those taught me about syntax and grammar and fluctuation and all this stuff, you know. So it's helped me with a podcast by, you know, articulating thought, in intros and outros, and then asking the right questions, and then personal growth, and then acting, is listening to yourself and others. So, yeah, although I'm doing a lot of talking today, but you're interviewing me, but I normally,
that's the way it's supposed to be right now.
What's that?
It's hard. It's hard being the interviewee. So
right.
yeah, you're doing great.
Thank you. So it's basically just, I'm trying to purge myself. I also try to, just dump total honesty, no censorship, total, purge on what's, as long as you're a decent person, I guess I am decent, you try to purge yourself to total honesty. So I think that's why it's gone well. A lot of people told me that, this is, you're made to do this. I'm like, well, I've made all these moves that have enabled me to do that, but that, as far as that's concerned.
We were talking about all the different people that you've had on your show, people that you obviously thought were interesting enough to talk to. And you were talking about how, your stand-up comedy, how that kind of connects with getting people to open up. One thing that I see a big connection with in like any type of discipline, whether it's like stand-up, whether it's art, any type of art-based thing, you're constantly like bashing your head into a wall until you and saying, one day I'm going to break through this fucking wall. But you're still giving yourself a ton of damage. That's the same thing. You started off as a bodybuilder. You started off in weight training.
Right.
Every day you go in and you pick up this weight and you say, one day I'm going to be stronger. One day I'm going to be stronger. One day I'm going to have abs. One day I'm going to, and it's the same thing. A lot of people don't get that. It's believing in the impossible until it becomes reality. Right. And a lot of it is being a stubborn bastard. And I'm sure
it's true,
but it pays dividends. So
yeah, concur. Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just time plus effort will reach you some sort of success. It might not, because I could work out as much as I can, but I'm not going to play in the NBA. I mean, really, there's just, I guess Spud Webb, and you could say all those things, but at a certain age or certain things, there's just certain high improbability. But when, it comes time to realize that, especially when it comes to physical fitness, and I started off from a point where I was extremely unfit, that when you take that time and you could see results like a snowball. Anybody lives in a snowy area, you can push a snowball, and then after a while it accumulates. So it's the same thing with any kind of business, art form. Stand-up comedy is interesting because it's really hard.
I can imagine.
Yeah, and it's really intense, to go up there with nothing but a microphone and you say, I'm going to entertain these people, and I'm also going to get them to laugh. And what happens is that, you're good at, let's say at school, or you're good at a party, and you're like, all I need to do is bring that up on the stage. It's kind of like, you're like, well, wait, I played golf here, you played, and sometimes you might even do stand up really well the first time, right? And you're like, that's it, HBO special next month, right? Right. So then you're like, no. Then they do your second time. You're like, what happened? Now I suck. And it's the hills and valleys, but then also you start to, it's the crowd. You're a human being, so you don't know how the feeling of rapport, right? So when you're doing something new, you're nervous, and when you get up on stage and you've been doing it a lot, and you get to your timing gets a certain way, everything slows down. It's like a batter can see the pitch much slower when he's been, hitting the ball like 1,000 times his whole life, right? So that's like with anything, everything slows down, and you can see the pitches coming to you at a much slower pace, even though it might be a 98 mile per hour fastball.
So when you get into a spot, you're doing an interview, and I don't know, your phone dies, everything, things are just going off the rails. Like,
that's good. What you just did is great.
What do you do?
You just did what you just did. It was perfect. You did exactly what a good podcaster is supposed to do. Because when you're a comedian or an entertainer, the most important thing, we just had Greg Dean, my comedy mentor, who's the premier study of humor and joke writing in the planet. He's been doing it since the early 80s. And he studies joke structure. And basically, the most important thing when you're a comedian, when you're a performer, anybody, and I've studied acting for many, many years, and all this is an art form, is the rapport with the audience. And if somebody drops a glass at the comedy club and you don't say anything, that's embarrassing. You have to say something. And if your podcast dies in the middle, do not say something. Say something. And it's either say something funny or cop to it, analyze it, whatever you're great at, whatever you're good at. You might not be a comedian, but you say something about it, you cop to it. You just don't ignore it if it's something that's blatant.
Yeah, yeah. One thing I've noticed about comedians, it seems like you can't be a complete jackass and be funny. Like right. There is being able to process the world in a way to see it, observe it, and then make it funny. What got you into comedy in the first place? What was the spark that made you want to get into that?
Every comedian, most comedians, not all, not every, but most comedians are like myself. They all had painful or some type of painful childhood. They took the pain and they got somebody to laugh once or twice or 3 times. And then it became a pattern to where you're like, I can get people to laugh, and that's the first bit of success or pleasure I can get from somebody or something. So now you exercise that. And that was my first bit of success, was getting people to laugh, because I was very socially awkward. I was hyper when I was supposed to be calm. I was calm when I was supposed to be hyper or have energy. I didn't talk when I was supposed to talk. It was really, strange. A lot has changed, but at least I try to harness it. And what happens is that you learn how to deal with that. And most comedians have a humble inner side because they come from a humble beginning, even though Robin Williams grew up in a rich family or a well-to-do family. His dad worked at GM and all that. But the thing is that he was an only child. He was lonely, and he had his own pains, and he got involved in those pains. And there's a humble side to that. So that's why all comedy set in the negative. Every single joke that you've ever laughed at, there's a shattered assumption set in a negative denominator. So basically, the old Henny Youngman, take my wife, please. When he says, take my wife, for example, he's like, no, take my wife, take her because I hate her. Such a shattered assumption with a negative denominator. And most comedians will say, well, you can't write jokes. You just got to be funny. And that's bullshit. The fact is that most comedians have unconscious competence on how they do comedy. So they're usually, even Seinfeld, who came from a well-adjusted family, there's, he's all his comedy is set in the negative with observations. And most comedians just learn how to, Seinfeld's thing is that he's miserable, right? Even little things, bother him. And that's beautiful. He could still be wealthy and still have, pains, maybe your brain is constantly, not at peace. You can be the most wealthiest person, but you might not be at peace. And that was his weakness.
Is there anybody now that's kind of blowing your hair back in terms of comedy?
Ooh, yeah. Well, yeah. There's some, yeah. That's a tough question. There's a lot. Like there's.
The scene has changed so much, even just since 2000.
What's his name? Not Leo Vaughn. Vaughn, his last name.
I know you're talking about. My brain is shot. I've been up since 4.
Yeah. And that's tough because there's so many of them. It's a shame that Louis C.K. kind of boned himself on in the public spotlight, because he's a comedian's comedian. He's just such a great joke writer. He's just different. It's
so solid. It's just like, stop being creep. Yeah. He was telling us the whole time he's a fucking creep.
Yeah. No, that's not, you know what, that's the rapport of the audience is the most important thing for a comedian. So, it's tough because you got to walk that tightrope in order to tell to the jokes, because jokes are supposed to be a shattered assumption, and find new content. You have to surprise your audience, and at the same time, you can't break rapport with the audience. And then your audience is now with the internet. Your audience, you're performing to 100 people in a club, but then they film something and then it goes out to the world audience.
Yeah.
So now when you're performing or on this podcast, you have to realize that I'm trying to be as real as I can, but also in the back of our mind as a performer, you're thinking, wait a second, I need to make sure that I'm cognizant not just of me talking to Casey, not just talking who's going to be on this podcast, but you never know. The whole planet, how would they think of this? Do they think that's funny? And you don't have to dictate your whole comedy that way. But if you do say something, say it at your own peril, because the world has ramifications.
Oh, yeah. There's been such a huge debate lately about like cancel culture and all that, which I think is just like, don't do things that are distasteful or whatever, and kind of keep up with social mores and you'll be fine.
It's tough.
Yeah. It's
because it's constantly changing, right?
It is. I showed my daughters Encino Man, which I told them was a documentary, and they were completely and totally on board. And then finally my wife is like, no, it's not a documentary. But the good guy in the movie said the gay F word.
Wow.
Which
really?
Completely and totally, like, it's like nails on a chalkboard now, even though we grew up like playing football and going like, we played a game called Smear the Queer, for God's sake.
Yeah.
And now, like, I wouldn't dream of calling anybody something like that just because, like, no, don't be a dick.
I don't, the reason why, most comedians become comedians, at least the reason why I became comedians, for connection, right? So I wanted to, and I pushed the line, I was a comedian in the 80s and the 90s and 2000, and I pushed the line, and, but my whole intention is to treat people that the way they want to be treated, but also make people laugh. So that's tough. So if, but the thing is, I don't know, a lot of these comedians, unless they say something really egregious, you could just say, look, I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, if somebody did blackface in the early 80s, you know what? All you really need to do is like, what? If you really care about how people think and feel, you can say, look, you know what? I'm really sorry about that. I back then, I really had no idea that I would do anything that hurt anybody. My true intention is to have love in my heart, and I don't want to hurt anybody. And God, I'm so sorry for that. And, I thought it was funny at the time, but it was a sign of the times, and I wouldn't not do that now. And I see how that is bad. And everybody out there, if I hurt you, I'm sorry.
Speaking of, we talked to Bruce Valanche not long ago, and he was the guy that told Ted Danson to do the blackface thing.
Did he really? Wow.
I think it was Friars Club or something. And
yeah.
Oh my, like, that Ted Danson has been able to bounce back from that is indicative of the character that he has, I'm assuming, because I don't think anybody could say anything bad about Ted Danson other than like, he probably shouldn't have done that.
Right. It depends on how, look at, I like Mel Gibson, and I'm a Jewish guy. So, but he said he was sorry, and somebody's like, do you want to watch Bad Santa? I'm like, yeah, I want to watch Bad Santa. Because that was a movie. It was like a B movie that he did like last year. I was like, yeah, I want to see it. I like Mel Gibson. He said he was sorry, and and I'm out here in Texas. So funny because like non-Jewish friends are like, you sure you want to see that? You're not mad up here. No, he said he was sorry. He didn't say it again. He didn't show up. I'm like, let's give a chance. I mean, like, give anybody a couple cocktails, they might say the same shit.
Yeah.
I don't know. I forgive pretty easily. I don't forget, but I mean, it depends on the what he, I don't know. everybody's different too. I respect anybody that might not, forgive them, but that's just me.
So you are constantly working. You do a lot. What do you do? Because you're also a dad. How do you separate your work life from, your productive life, from your creative life? Is there a way that you go about it to achieve that balance, or is it just like constantly running?
I laugh because I bet you my wife, if she was sitting here, she'd be like, No, you balance the best you can. You prioritize case by case, right? So you're like last weekend, I've been going to soccer matches for my 12-year-old. She's got a soccer match. Now I'm doing something. So my wife said, if you were going to do, because I prioritize like on Fridays, it's Thursday nights and Fridays, I record inbound, outbound podcast. I'll do interviews and I'll do the interviewing, and maybe one slot on a Saturday and a Sunday. But the rest of the time is Saturdays and Sundays is domesticated time. I'll either be with the family, or I will work on I got a 10-acre ranch out here. I like to work on the ranch.
Oh, wow.
Work on the property a little bit. I'll do mowing. I'll listen to my other podcasts. Like I'm having John Lee Dumas on my podcast. So he just wrote a new book. So I'll listen to that. I'm like, that's about a 3-hour, 4-hour mow ride. All right. So, I'll get in there and I'll listen to his new book, and then you just try to I'm big on net time. So if I can do 2 things at once or 3 things at once, I was like, oh yeah, I was able to like work out and watch CNN or watch the news or whatever. That was cool, or multitask, but yeah, family is important. Family comes first. That's why I left to go out here in Texas to be with my family, really. And I didn't want to go on the road and be a comedian. I didn't want to I wanted to be a filmmaker and actor, but not as much as I wanted to be with my family first. So, family comes first. First you take care of your health. That's to me number one. Then you take care of your mind, and then, so you're good for your family, and then family, for me, that's just my priorities. I don't know. Other people might be different.
I hear you. What do you do to mellow out?
Well, I'm a movie guy, so I watch movies, I'm constantly moving on the go, right? So I'm like, I got my business, which is, constantly growing. It's been growing, knock on wood for, since I started that business to get into to make that movie, Love Hollywood Style. That business has gone ever since, and it's continues to grow. Then I work out, and, try to work out 6-7 days a week, and then I, so what do I do to mellow out? By the time I'm done with all that, I'm still like one of those like guys that like film nerds that like to get together with other guys and like talk about film trivia. So like you could name like who played for the Dodgers on second base in 1978. I'm that guy when it comes to film. So I'll usually, do that. I'll just really like to make sure I stay on top of movie watching. And cooking too. I love to cook. I got, it's Texas now, so I got really into smoking barbecue.
Oh, nice.
Got a little barbecue station I'm building in the backyard, with a custom smoker and a grill and a whole setup, a tented area. It's going to be awesome. This
weekend, I'm going to be tearing down our old deck and building a new one. And I have plans for a new grill setup, and I'm excited. I'm ready for it. I love my foods, man. So what do you like to cook? What do you like to make? Lately I've just been doing kebabs and stuff like that. Like I'm not a great like grill master or anything like that. We'll do fish tacos occasionally and right. Do stuff like that. But lately it's more kebabs. Like my wife is nuts about right. that. And that's healthy because you get some vegetables in there. Oh yeah. Yeah. So we made too many a few months back, and we invited my in-laws. They live about a mile away. And my mother-in-law, I hope. My father-in-law came in. This man can kill a steak with like he'll make it into shoe leather immediately. Oh. And he was like, I'll take over from here. I'm like, no, you could talk to me. You can go to the fucking house. This is my grill. And we get in. And, he was kind of butthurt from that. We get in, and my mother-in-law is just going over the top, like, this is the best steak I've ever had. Oh my God. And you could
And the old man burned it?
No, the old man stayed away from the grill because I told him
she was complimenting your steak.
Yeah, and you could just see his like soul just kind of withering. And every time we talk about or we go to their house for a grill out, my mother-in-law's like, I wish you were doing it. You did really good last time we were over at your house. And my father-in-law was just kind of grating in the corner like.
To me, a steak has got to be, everybody's just funny out and how they like their steak. My wife likes it hers well. Like she likes it cooked all the way through. I like a 2.5-inch ribeye bone in with salt, pepper, and garlic. And I like to get buttered up the iron skillet. And I want to get that. I put it on a propane, turkey fryer cooker. So that it's like you could drop a water bead on there and it'll just disintegrate. And I'll get that, and I cook what is called Pittsburgh style, to where you blacken it on the outside.
And it's still nice and red.
Yeah, it's so thick on the inside. And that brings out the units of flavor and the fat and all that. That's a good steak right there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like salt, pepper, and garlic. Like if you have to add too much more, like if I have to put steak sauce on my steak, somebody's messed up somewhere. And just, yeah.
It's all about the fire,
Oh yeah,
it's all and how you work that.
Yeah, so I'm guessing you've had a little bit of extra time to get into that, especially with this pandemic. Has that?
Well, I'm out in Texas. I mean, you got people out here. When because we do parties out here in the ranch, and this is Texas, so everybody's like, "What are you cooking?" And it's barbecue's a thing out here. It's just not a fallacy. So.
Yeah, and if you invite somebody to a barbecue and have hamburgers and hot dogs on the grill or something, they're going to look at you like you have lied to them and you're a terrible person. Yeah.
Right.
Barbecue is barbecue, man.
How has COVID affected us? Well, I'll tell you, knock on wood, because I own a tarp company and I built my warehouse and my facility outside of the city. We weren't affected at all. If anything, we got busier. So we donated we have a lot of tarps. There's a lot more homeless in the LA, New York, Austin, the loaves and fishes out here. We donate a lot of tarps to the homeless. So yeah,
that's amazing.
I've been busier than ever this year. And I've gone out so much from nightclubbing, I was a nightclub promoter for 7 years. So you go out 7 nights and 7 days a week. So I don't miss going out if I have to stay at home all the time, and I got to tell you, like talking one-on-one with somebody like you today, that's the most important thing, man, not to be poetic, but people forget, we're lucky to have this kind of technology, like instead of
oh yeah, it's crazy.
In 1819, when there was that Spanish flu or whatever. So, people forget, like, at least most people, the way I look at it is, there's an old saying with John Ford when he was doing a movie with John Wayne, and the DP, they were out in the middle of the desert, salt mines in California, and said, hey, what the heck? There is nothing to film out here that's worthy for the camera. And then John Ford looked at his DP and says, we're going to film the most worthy thing you could ever put on celluloid. And that's the human face. Most interesting thing, when you go to restaurants and all that, the most interesting thing, people really should, or people, so, it's amazing. There's actually been more one-on-one, I think, with people, FaceTiming, and really spending more time with each other like we're doing right now, rather than just going with your, the people that you always hang out with, going to a restaurant where you never talk to anybody, or, to me, it's a different level of connection.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And you're really kind of able to get into areas of people's lives that you haven't really been probed yet. So that's really cool. How did you, this is kind of an aside, I guess. How did you go from Nightclub Promoter to Tarps? Like that's such an interesting, I'm guessing you saw a need and said, I can fill that. Was there anything outside of that?
Nah, so there's a guy, and I always followed this, and I never knew who he was back then, but just a guy named Mike Rowe. I don't know if you know his does.
Yeah.
Okay. So he has a great saying. He says, look, you could, follow your passion or follow opportunity. And that's a big, heavy duty choice. So my passion was being a comedian, an actor, a filmmaker. And I've inherently always thought, well, at the back of your mind, you want to, in order to do that, sometimes you burn the boats. And I've always burned the boats on something. But, as sometimes, it's important to like have a little raft. And I was like, I have to do something. And I knew that when I started, I wanted to do something on the internet. And I was like, can I do something on the internet that was like maybe, like with acting or filmmaking? And most of the people who were making money on the internet in the late 90s, I started in 2000, were selling a widget. And I said, I want to sell something on the internet. And I think the most important thing to me was to sell something that was useful, that everybody needed, and was simple. And I chose that product. My dad wanted me to sell tools like abrasive wheels and drill bits and all that. I said, that's just not moving my blood. Tarps can be used for so many different applications. They can be used for outdoors, for hunting, for fishing, for survival. And those things appeal to me.
Out here recently, and there were several houses that I would pass on my way to work that, had to use an emergency tarp to cover up because the tornado took the damn roof off.
Right. And that appealed to me because I was like, there was a sense of like, there's an importance to it. I didn't feel that like abrasive wheels or drill bits were important. I mean, not like a sense of like, I pictured myself doing what I do today. And that is, when I was a nightclub promoter at Thanksgiving time, I used to let people come in half price for the canned food for a homeless. And now for Thanksgiving, now I said, I could take tarps and I can give them to the homeless, during Thanksgiving time. There's a sense of value for me. There's a sense of growth that I can maybe get from that product, and so now I've done that almost every year. We didn't do it last year because of COVID, but we've donated tarps. Whenever there's a hurricane, we donate tarps. And I like that sense of, of importance that product, did. And also it's useful. So people are like, yeah, I could use that, for hunting or fishing or survival. And that's what appealed to me to that product.
That's awesome. It's one of those things you don't think of until you need it. And then it's the most important thing you can get that day because, oh my God, the roof's leaking or, it covers so many bases. So. Right.
And I used to be like, how in the beginning, I was like, I guess it could be this big of a significant thing. But then I realized in 2000, I think it was 2006, there was a company that they're a really cool company. And they're like they're a $2 billion a year company. They're the coolest thing. They have the lifestyle brand that's totally awesome. And they said, we're going to come out with a really just heavy duty cooler. And we're going to call the company Yeti Coolers. And now that they symbolize something that is like just so super cool lifestyle. When you think Yeti, you think adventure. So that's pretty much where we're going with my company. We're branding a product where we want to define the industry and think adventure. So we're designing something now that's very elaborate and every pain point that everybody's ever had in that product. So that's the goal with that company, is to make it like this, big adventurous kind of, lifestyle branded product.
Out of all the different like ebbs and flows and like you've had, some people only have like 2 or 3 careers over their lifetime. You've gone through so many different transitions. Has there ever been anything that you don't feel you're done with yet and you want to try to get back to?
Yeah, with filmmaking, of course, it's always the addiction in the back, of your mind, to make that, because I was successful artistically. I won awards, but I wasn't successful financially, and financially is where, it's a validation, and it's also sustainability. So that's where I'm segueing now. We're doing a documentary on that crazy film I did, Love Hollywood Style.
Oh yeah.
Doing a documentary about that. It's called Burning the Boats, and it's about people that choose their passion over opportunity at all costs. So we have other filmmakers that have done that have kind of burned their boats, and other people have, artists and everything. But that's something I want to get back into. And I'll probably end up being that old stand-up comedian, because right now, I don't see myself in my business forever. But I might probably be that old guy that what's that old guy doing at the comedy club? It's that might be me. Let's just stand up or something.
Youth does not, comedy isn't restricted to young people. But
it's kind of like being an athlete. I mean, unless it's maybe I could break that rule. I don't know. Maybe that can happen. But most of great comedians are were started when they were young, with the exception of Rodney Dangerfield's kind of on the older side. But who knows? I don't. That's another thing. I don't have any rules for myself, because I used to have tons of rules, and they just limit you. You just create your own rules, and then you just do what you want, and you find the opportunity, and hopefully your opportunity collides with passion, and you just go, and you just don't worry about anybody else says, because it's a freaking waste of time.
What do you do when the passion is starting to dip? When you're having a rough day, but this thing has to be done. You go in for an interview or something, or you go in to do an edit on your documentary, and it's like pulling teeth. What do you do to get through it?
You cop to it. You admit it's okay, this is, first of all, everything's, from a personal growth standpoint, there's the triad of emotions, right? So you realize that you can control everything, or majority, by your physiology, your focus, and your vocabulary. That's a big denominator on how you're going to act towards something. So if you say, look, this is a recipe for my success to, I'm a different submodality right now. If I was going to get in comedy mode, I would be in, okay, if I was going to do stand-up tonight, I would be I'm going to focus on all the great, when I've done great, I'm going to focus on me doing great, and all the great times of the past to substantiate that. My vocabulary is going to be totally, and my internal dialogue is going to be totally maxing myself up for success with, saying, validating myself constantly, internally. And then my physiology, I'm not going to have my head down, I'm not going to be I'm going to be, in an empowering position. That's half the battle right there. So whenever you're having a tough day, you can control it by what's called, in personal development, it's called the triad of emotions. And that's your physiology, what you focus on, and your words that you internally tell yourself. And they teach this to race car drivers. It's the symbolic thing of is that if you're skidding out into, and you're heading towards a wall, they tell you, you don't have time to have your arms do, you have to, your eyes have to move faster than anything. Move your eyes in the direction that you want to go in, away from the wall, your hands will follow. So your focus is really, so you just need to focus, and that's what I try to do. I'm very methodical about it.
It's crazy. Like a through line for a lot of the stuff you've talked about today has just been, a lot of it has been being honest, but not just with other people, but with yourself. And
it takes more work not to be, really.
Yeah. Consistently lying to yourself is hard, but yet here a lot of people like to stay. Yeah, it fascinates me just how adamant you are at keeping up that honesty and making it work. And utilizing that honesty.
I grew up with that because my mom was she would always be like, I was the oops baby, right? So then she would say, my son, he wasn't planned, and he was, I drank, I smoked, I ran up and down the stairs, but he survived, but he's my dessert. I'm like, Mom, can you listen? She just wants to know if you want ranch or blue cheese. Can you please not tell her the whole story? Right? Just give her the order, please. So, that I grew up with everybody sharing everything, So I'm used to I was at a restaurant before my mom died. You were at a restaurant. I just told her, I said, look, I got an upset stomach, but then we go to a restaurant, we're at Chili's, and I see it, this is before I was married. And I was like, I see this attractive waitress. And, she talks, she said, what do you want? I was like, well, we are at Chili's. I said, maybe I'll get a bowl of chili. I don't know. How good is the chili at Chili's? And my mom's like, you can't have that. You got diarrhea. I'll just gonna have a salad. Thank you. That was it. So like I'm used to like my mom, no sensory. And that's kind of like how I grew up. So that was, and then after a while, you just exercise it. So hopefully I'm being honest with you. I'm constantly trying to fish for honesty. That's the most important thing to me. To be honest with yourself and others.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're an Irish family. We don't talk at all. We just bear our feelings and drink and
Most people talk. Yeah.
Who has time to talk when you could just bury it with alcohol? Man, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, man. I thank you for putting up with me. One.
Oh, you're awesome.
And two, I just want people to know, like, this is the level of, like, the guy that you get right now is the guy you have on the show. However, he's a lot more competent at this than I am. So,
what's that?
The guy that I'm talking to now, the guy who you are talking on the show. If you listen to Long Shot Leaders podcast, you'll get this guy plus another guy, and they're both a lot more competent than I am. So
you know what? Because you're so honest as well. I disagree with you. I think that I think you are very honest. And you're natural. And only thing is, I would say don't apologize for that. You would own it. You're doing great. When you're in this interview. We have two interviews that we have, two different backgrounds, right? Because the Zoom didn't work. Then we went to the Skype, and then that didn't work. So we went back to Zoom. And you know what? You handle it like a champ. You're so gracious about it, and you were honest about it. You're doing all right. You're doing awesome.
I appreciate it, Michael. Michael Stein, Long Shot Leaders podcast. You guys check out the show. And I'm really so I've seen Love Hollywood Style. I enjoyed it very much. And now you're talking about this documentary, and I'm going to have to keep my ear to the ground for that, because it sounds like it'll be fascinating. When do you expect to have this thing? Do you have an ETA for it?
Well, we just started editing it because we just found the footage, because there was a guy that was on the set, my dear friend David Ara. He filmed pretty much every single day, except for Faye Dunaway. We couldn't film her because she said, I don't want to be filmed behind the scenes. But we have pictures of her. But everybody else was filmed. Every actor, Stephen Tobolowsky, who you've seen in millions of movies, and all the Coolio and Andy Dick, and just tons of the whole. And it was crazy because I was working out of my rented $800 a month shack in Sherman Oaks as I was doing my business that was paying for it, and it was just pandemonium. It is crazy. So we just started finding all this footage that he discovered that he had. And so that's probably not going to be done until, because once again, I got to go to kids' soccer match, right? Family comes first. We'll probably finish that before the year is done. It'll be done before the end of the year. And then we'll be entering that into documentary film festivals for 2022.
Oh, that's so awesome. Yeah. I'm excited to hear it. I'm excited to see it. And hopefully I see you guys at like Sidewalk. There's a really amazing film festival in Birmingham called Sidewalk Film Festival. And I hope you guys consider that, because it sounds like a really fun show.
We'll have to do that. And we'll have to just do that, enter in that, because of you. And then we'll have to go out there. And what's the good food out there to get in your town?
Oh my gosh. In Birmingham. Good Lord. I'm trying to think. I haven't been to a restaurant in over a year and a half, so I don't even know what's open anymore.
Right. But what's Birmingham known for? What's like, when you go to Birmingham, you got to try this because it's really good.
I always direct people to Saw's Barbecue. It's a little juke joint, and they have a sweet tea chicken sandwich that's out of this world, but it's like soaked in sweet tea, and then they fry it up. But they also have this thing called pork and greens, which pulled pork barbecue on a bed of collard greens, which is then on top of a bed of cheese grits. And it's one of those meals that they say like sticks to your sides. Like, it's so freaking good, dude.
And I pour Tabasco on my greens.
Yes.
That sounds so good with the pulled pork too. The Tabasco on the pulled pork would be great.
And then you have the cheese grits underneath. It's phenomenal. Like I've seriously
sounds amazing.
I've dreamed about this food. I've had dreams about it. It's that good. So
yeah. That's where we're going to go. We're going to enter. We're going to finish this documentary. We're going to come out to Birmingham, Alabama. I'm bullshitting you. And then we're going to go to the Saul's barbecue. Saul's?
Yes, Saws. Like the you cutting something.
Saws. Okay, Saws barbecue. All right. And that's in Birmingham.
Yes.
Right.
Oh my gosh. You won't be disappointed. Pork and Greens is life. You will like it.
Oh, that sounds so good. All right. Done deal. I love it. That's a promise. That's a promise right there.
Dude, and
do you know anybody at that film festival?
I do not, sadly.
I'm already networking for the film.
It's really started to grow in the past few years, and it's made like a bunch of like lists for like top film festivals in America and stuff like that, just because it's one of those weird out of the way film festivals you wouldn't necessarily think of, but every year they have a lot of great success, and so much so that they actually open their own theater for independent films in like the heart of downtown Birmingham, just based off of that one time a year film festival. So it has staying power, which is kind of cool.
I love it. I want to go to Birmingham. I want to go in that film festival, and I want to go to Saw's Barbecue to get collard greens on top of pulled pork and some Tabasco sandwich.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. If nothing else, go there for the pulled pork barbecue on greens. Awesome. Because it's good. Michael Stein, thank you again, man. I've really enjoyed listening to your show. I listened to about 4 of them today while I was at work, because I'm in a microscope all day. And so if I'm listening to something that kind of keeps things going, I really enjoyed what you do. And I hope you guys get a chance to check it out. And also, Love Hollywood Style. You guys track that down. It's so good. Michael Stein, again, it was a pleasure, buddy.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.
All right. Take it easy, brother.
You too.
Spaghetti! And we're back.
That's right. We are back. Back in the saddle again. Well, I hope you guys really, really enjoyed that as much as we did making it for you. And if you liked what you heard and you want to hear more, you got to go check out spoilerverse.com, because at spoilerverse.com we have a plethora amazing directors and artists of all walks of life, and editors and writers, and oh my god, are you a lover of comic books like we are? Then there's so many amazing people from the comic book world over at spoilerverse.com, and I highly implore you to go there and check it out.
Yeah, and while you're there, you can check out all the other podcasts on our network, like Bridges and Geekdoms and Funny Book Forensics and Haphazard Adventures and Nerds from the Crypt and so many more.
Misery
we put out
Point Radio.
episodes all the time. Go check all of them out, and check out all of the reviews and previews and articles we have going up every single day for you, every day on spoilerverse.com for you to check out, to read, and to love, and to like, and to comment. We have a store link. If you want to help support the site, you can do it 2 ways. One, go to our Patreon, which is patreon.com/spoilercountry. Or go to our store link in the middle of the site there and get a t-shirt, a face mask, a hoodie, something, look fly as hell, and help support the site when you do that, because we get $1 or $2. And, maybe you want to talk to us. If you do, you can do it obviously on all the socials, but if you go to scpod.us/Discord, you can join our public Discord server and come chat with us all day long.
I couldn't say it better myself, dude.
There you go.
You just mouthed out a ton of information at once, and really, I hope you guys enjoy what you're hearing, because we're working our butts off to bring it to you.
We are.
I guess there's only one left thing. Yeah, I'm going to go with it. There's only one thing left to do.
What's that?
In an oceans of podcasts,
We are Cthulhu.
as Cthulhu compels you to
Spaghetti. Open the mind.
and read more.
Spaghetti.
Do you listen to podcasts that sound like this? Hey, welcome back to the Super OK Podcast, where our audio sounds mediocre.
Or do you prefer podcasts that sound more like this? Crisp, clear, fun, easy to listen to, and full of awesomeness? Well, you should check out Spoiler Country, hosted exclusively over at spoilerverse.com.